National Council of Teachers of English hosted a conference with sessions titled Lil Wayne in the Classroom, Queerness and Graphic Novels, and many other topics. On a brighter note, the Washington Post released an article highlighting homeschooling as the fastest growing form of education in America. And finally, a public school in Florida is considering implementing a classical education curriculum in the next school year. We are going to discuss all of this and more. My name is Soren Schwab, and this is Office Hours with Jeremy Tate. Welcome back to the Anchored Podcast, and thank you for joining us for episode 2 of our new series, Office Hours with Jeremy Tate. I'm here at CLT headquarters in Annapolis with none other than our founder and CEO, Jeremy Tate. Jeremy, my brother, how are you doing today?
Good to see you, sir.
Good. Yeah, we got jam-packed agenda today. Let's start with this. We're sometimes shying away, from leading in too much in certain controversial topics, but I feel like we have to cover this. So our friend Daniel Buck was kind of blasting this all over Twitter, and it was the National Council of Teachers of English, the NCTA. They're hosting a conference, and it's bonkers. some of the it's not about what to do about the literacy crisis in our country, right? Like, hey, our authorities can't read. It's just give you a few, and then I would love to hear your comments. How to use CRT to deepen our teaching of literature. Wasn't CRT in K-12 education, right?
That's right.
Learning for critical consciousness, books that inspire activism, youth climate activism, embracing bodies with books. I think that has groomer alert written all over it. Decolonizing in the department. So these are English teachers in the humanities that are getting training for what they're doing in K-12. Just your thoughts on that.
Creepy and weird are the thoughts. I mean, what was the one about Lil Wayne?
It's just Lil Wayne in the classroom. So probably how his lyrics can inspire us to
desperate attempt to chase after being relevant to students. If there's one thing, a teenager doesn't want their 55-year-old English teacher talking about, it's Lil Wayne. That's like their world. That's their territory. They're like, stay out, teach me about something, in your world. It's this very silly, it's embarrassing almost, chasing after being relevant to students. I think, Soren, what we see in the classical space is that when a teacher shows kids, hey, this book, this story, the Odyssey, it's been around for 2,500 years. It's been passed down generation after generation, and now it's your turn. That's timeless, that's beautiful, and students can be drawn into something instead of teachers desperately trying to get into their world.
Yeah, and I want to pick your brain a little bit on the idea of activism, and just a very quick story. I was in New Hampshire last year. My wife and I would travel a lot. And I was in New Hampshire, and we were sitting next to this lovely couple, and I heard an accent, and so I asked, as a German, like, okay, I like accents. Where are you from? And she said, we're from Iceland. But our kids, we moved to the US because we wanted our kids to go to school here. But we changed our mind pretty quickly. And I said, oh, why is that? She said, well, she said, I am very liberal. I am a very liberal person. I want to say that up front. But she said, I did not come to the US to send my kids to school to become activists. I sent them to school here to learn how to read and write so that they can later on become activists, right? And so I think even politically, right, on the left, there's still this sense of why is education only about activism these days? And when you look at some of these titles, climate activism, books to inspire activism, are we still educating the whole person, or is it really, is there really a deeper purpose behind this? And I think the NCTA has an opinion on it, but what are your thoughts on this idea of education?
Yeah, I think about the 1960s liberal, and they were very different, and they were very well read. And you think about the Democrats that took over Berkeley campus, right? And these were activists, but they were well read, and they weren't educated to go out with marching orders and be activists. Soren, I'm not making this up. I went to a protest in Maryland, and I walked up to the protest to say, what are you protesting about? talked to 3 different people and got 3 different answers. You know why they were protesting at this particular protest. And so I think it's exciting to be told the world's unjust and go out there and demand justice and be part of that. But to do it out of ignorance is just folly.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really well said. One related topic, just briefly that I want to talk about, and obviously we're at CLT, we're in kind of in the testing sphere, and you've tweeted about this before, right? The idea that when have we bought into that notion that education is values neutral, right? That education is really just this neutral thing that it's not, right? And at CLT, we at least are honest about that and say, well, if anything, if they have to be indoctrinated, quote unquote, right, then it should be in truth, goodness, and beauty. But our friends over at the College Board saw this College Board's AP Classroom platform. There was a leak, and someone posted a screenshot of a question from an AP Human Geography test.
Yes.
And I think you saw that, right? And it was
Caroline Andrews.
it was
Yes.
Caroline Andrews. You're right. You're right. It was a graph, and it was birth rates and death rates in selected countries, and they had France, Mexico, India, Egypt, Nigeria, and so forth. And then they had birth rates and death rates. And essentially, the correct answer to this was France, and the reason was it was about female empowerment. The data in the table can be used to describe high level of female empowerment for which of the following countries? And the answer was France. Why? Because they have the lowest birth rate. So essentially, right, equating low birth rates with female empowerment. You're a father of 6.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, the Babylon Bee could not make this up as satire. I mean, all they're giving students is a table of birth rates and death rates, and they're saying who has been the most empowered, the women that are having the fewest number of babies. I think, didn't Queen Victoria have 6 babies? I think she was probably a woman of power, right? She was one of the longest reigning monarchs of England. This idea is antinatalist. This is a toxic idea that the College Board is pushing, and they've been exposed to. And I think this is why, Soren, what we're doing at CLT is really resonating with people. Is they know the College Board has been pushing this toxic nonsense and doing it for a long time, but there just hasn't been anywhere else to go, and now there is.
Yeah, well put, well put. For our topic 2, and we're so excited about this. The Washington Post writing an article and actually a positive article kind of highlighting the growth of the homeschool movement. And so that the title, Homeschooling's Rise from Fringe to Fastest Growing Form of Education. And just to provide some numbers, in states with comparable enrollment figures, the number of homeschool students increased by 51% over the past 6 years, far outpacing the 7% growth even in private school enrollment. So, wow. 51%, and we can say that's more than just a COVID bump, right? It points to a larger trend.
Yeah, and good on the Washington Post. This article, I thought, was not. They weren't pushing an opinion. You know, they did quote the Harvard Bartlett. You know, who said, "Well, what are they all learning?" And she wants to see more regulation. But for the most part, they're reporting numbers. They did a lot of their own research. And one of the sub stories in this one that was so interesting to me was that this is across all demographics. It's, New York City more than doubling since 2017 in students homeschooling. And they also talk about the fact that everybody predicted, when COVID ends, the kids will go back. And the Washington Post acknowledged they didn't really go back, right? A few went back, but not nearly as many as they expected to. Really, really important article and an incredible story. I mean, homeschooling was basically illegal in most states just 40 years ago. And to go from that to the most popular or fastest growing kind of education, it's just an incredible story.
Yeah, it's still illegal in most European countries, including in my own Germany, right? And so, yeah, absolutely fascinating.
So do you find it in Germany, do people think that homeschooling is crazy? Like, what do they think of homeschooling?
Yeah, and when I moved to the US, I thought that too, right? But in a way, I mean, that's just, you grew up with, well, of course the state knows best. And, and so you need state credentialing, right, to be able to educate children. I mean, I not until I came to Hillsdale, I spoke with some homeschool students that defied all the stereotypes that I had, to like I had to check my own biases, right? But I was one of them. I'm guilty. absolutely guilty. And I think now that I'm on the road so much, and and I'm around sometimes public school students, homeschool students, I think we're going to see kind of a switch, kind of a flip in how the general population views homeschool students, right? Like the quote unquote socially awkward, don't know how. I think it's going to be the opposite because homeschool students know how to be articulate, right? They know how to have a conversation. They know how to make eye contact when they talk to an adult versus
Totally.
let's say like some kids in the public school, not to generalize, and I'm sure there's some in the private school, but they look down, look at their phone, are
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
necessarily, following proper English grammar. So I think there's going to be a change in our perception. But the Post estimates that there are now between 1.9 million and 2.7 million homeschooled children, depending obviously on the reliability of the data. That's amazing. And just a little quiz for you. The largest contributor to the growing number of homeschool students is the state of blank.
New York,
It is not New York. It is not New York.
Florida.
It is Florida. It is
All
it
right.
is it is
I
Florida.
saw that. And one county there is leading the way, right? Hillsborough County.
I think Hillsborough, yeah, around Tampa area. Yeah, I think 10,000 students are
Incredible.
being taught at home. And so yeah, interesting statistics for sure. And speaking of Florida, I feel like we've been speaking about Florida a lot with CLT, but it's a great state for education freedom and been good to CLT. But the Miami Herald, our friend Summer Bruegel, we got to meet her down at an event in West Palm Beach. She published an article a little while ago titled "Classical Education May Be Rolled Out at Miami Dade School." And so there's a conversation in Miami-Dade School District, which I know it's the largest in Florida. I think it's top three or top five
Yeah.
school districts in the country. They are considering converting, so to speak, one of their elementary schools to a classical model. Would be the first of its kind. So far, the closest has been kind of our classical charter school friends, but never any kind of district model. Yeah, thoughts on that, Jeremy?
I talked to some folks on the ground about this in Florida, and what I was told was that the demand was so overwhelming. The conversation went from having a classical tract to just making it all classical, right? And I think that's because when parents know that the kids at the classical charter school down the street are being offered they're being given a superior kind of education. I mean, who is going to opt out of the classical tract and go with the, modern progressive tract instead? Very, very few parents. And I think it's brilliant to kind of force parents to decide, or at least give them that option. I think you give every parent that option, classical is going to win 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, you're right. And you know more about this than I do, but the University of Florida, I believe it's is it the Hamilton Center, right?
That's
For
right. The new
classical.
honors college there. That's right.
Yeah. And I know Flagler, they have a kind of a classical ed program. So it seems like that there is a growing demand for it. And um, why not use a model that based on all metrics is being really successful and offer that
Yeah.
to more families. Of course, the article also, talks about, well, it's kind of a conservative education model. Summer uses, kind of DeSantis quite a bit and pushing it down. But to me, it seems like that transcends politics, right? Like if you're a parent, doesn't matter where you're from, what your politics are, you want your kids to be able to read and write. And so
Yep.
if there's a school in your district that is best at that, should be a no-brainer.
Totally. Soren, I think about a conversation with our mutual friend Kevin Roberts over at the Heritage Foundation. And Kevin was telling me that when he came to Texas Public Policy, was where he was before Heritage, in 2016, he said you couldn't really say out loud then you were classically educating your kids, and especially at home, right? And you fast forward 7 or 8 years, and it is most leaders like Kevin you talk to are classically educating their own children. I mean, this has been a seismic shift. And the fact that we're talking about an entire county, and look, I think people are going to move. People are going to move. People are going to want the same thing. We're going to see this go statewide, I think, in Florida, and then other states, I think, copying what they're doing there. It's incredible.
Yeah. Super encouraging. And maybe, yes, maybe something that initially started, as a red state issue, as many things have started, but ultimately,
Totally.
right, once parents see it doesn't really matter the politics there. We want what's best for our kids.
Well, and both parties do this. They'll rename the same concept and make it their own thing. So they'll rename it something else, and blue state folks will get on board with it at some point as well, and we'll be excited for them when that happens.
Right, absolutely wonderful. Well, this was delightful as always, Jeremy. Before I let you go, some folks that follow you on Twitter probably saw that you were recently in Rome with a group of Catholic superintendents and heads of school. Just give us a 30-second, highlight of your trip and yeah, how was that?
Yeah, one of the highlights, two of the highlights, Castel Gandolfo was incredible. It's where the Pope's summer residence. It's a beautiful, beautiful town about 10 miles south. It's where the University of Dallas summer campus is right near there. And we also did, Soren, something called a scabby tour, which is underneath St. Peter's Basilica. They have all these mausoleums and ancient burials there, as well as the bones of St. Peter. It was just people. It was a great group with some Catholic heads of school. And my main takeaway was just that the future of Catholic education is very bright. I'm super optimistic. I think it's only going up from here.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy. I know you're a busy man. Thanks for joining again today on this second episode of Office Hours with Jeremy. Super excited to pick this up in the new year.
Soren, thanks for having me, brother.
Merry Christmas to you and yours.
You and yours. Bye.